CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode with me, Peginkos Moyo, on Conversations on African Philanthropy. We're shooting this at the margins of the MasterCard Foundation funded project that focuses on the non-profit sector and this creation of dignified and fulfilling jobs. I'm happy to be joined by two colleagues who are working in the space in the non-profit sector but focusing mainly on issues of volunteerism. Firstly, I want to introduce and welcome Fredrick Sadia, who is with Chitole Good Friends Foundation. He's the founder and executive director in Kenya. Welcome.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much. And I also want to welcome Archimede Sekamana, who is with the Rwanda Volunteer Network and is executive director. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you too.
Thank you so much, colleagues. And I want to start firstly with talking about why we are here, which is that you have been part of the meeting that is focusing on the non-profit sector broadly, focusing on how it creates dignified and fulfilling jobs. And we are doing this here in Mombasa, simply because we wanted to come here and meet with different colleagues and partners from Kenya. But so far, from the conversations that you were hearing, where would you classify volunteerism and voluntary work? Is it something that can be classified as dignified, fulfilling? Because that's a concept that brought us here, and obviously, in some quarters you may not see it as work, but in other spaces, it's something that people will see as a calling, something with a purpose, something that people will also say is respectful, which has got all the attributes of what we call fulfilling and dignified work, except that in most cases there's no steady income or salary to it. So where do you classify volunteerism? Maybe let's start with you.
Thank you, Prof. It is true. I think significantly volunteering is fulfilling, and volunteering is dignified, and as will be further in the discussion, we will try to get to bring out why we think volunteering is fulfilling and dignified at the same time. But straight, I think it would fall under the category of philanthropy still for me.
Yeah.
But of course, again, I think broadly non-profit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And to you, Fredrick, just on this issue as well?
Professor, for me, I would see or classify volunteering as a pathway to the employment, and also the reason why maybe some of us we have put much emphasis on volunteering, it's because most of young people in Africa start by volunteering to get employment. So volunteering is something which has been neglected, not only by employers, also by the people even volunteering. So it's something which hasn't been taken into consideration.
Yeah.
So when it comes in recruiting people, so I see it also, as my colleague Fred Sadia said, as a dignified and fulfilling way of getting a formal employment. Yeah. So people need just to formalize it, make it more professional. So we have so many young people in informal volunteering. So now people need to think how to formalize that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something we can share later. So, but I see it as a dignified and fulfilling way of getting a dignified and fulfilling employment, because that's where you can gain experience.
In fact, to both your points, one of the things that you've been talking to my colleague Jacob, who's a specialist in this area, and one of the things that we keep talking about is that if you look at the history of volunteerism, and you look at your Peace Corps and others, the majority of people who have come to Africa, volunteering in Africa, immediately when they leave the continent, they actually get into these big positions.
Yeah, true.
That actually, like you're saying, is a pathway to a job, whether it's fulfilling or dignified, is probably another thing to talk about. But it's clearly a pathway for most of these advanced organizations that place people in Africa, for those people to actually go back and immediately get employed. But I'm not so sure that in the African continent we have actually gotten it right. I'm talking about our big institutions like African unions and so forth, whether they actually see the link between creating spaces for people to volunteer as pathways to actually those jobs.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
I would tell you
Your reflections on that.
Yeah. I would tell you the African Union is seized of the matter currently, and we have to give it to them because they're colleagues who've been working in this sector. And interestingly, that the African Union today has the African Union Volunteer Linkages platform, on which then they work on ways by which the youth in the continent could find it necessary for them to give themselves up into volunteer roles as a pathway to employment. And interesting, again, on the same is that currently we've had several engagements involving the Africa Union that talks about this, bringing it out to the fore. We've been discussing having webinars on how volunteerism could be a critical pathway to securing dignified and fulfilling employment. Eventually, because we're looking at skill set that you get to acquire while you are giving up yourself to the service of community. We are looking at the experience that you gather, because it's always been told that in Africa, when you're seeking for an employment as a young person, then you wonder where you're going to get the experience that is needed, because sometimes they talk about 5 years, sometimes they talk about 10 years. But in all of it, then we therefore see upcoming interest among us different formations, and we who are particularly in the volunteering sector are working hand in hand to ensure that there could be a better way of ensuring that volunteering then leads several young people into positions of employment. And it's also good in report that even this week, from the 18th to the 20th, the Africa Union Volunteer Linkages platform, together with some partners here, and the Kenyan government will be having a meeting, a conversation, just to look at issues around gender, employment, equality, inclusion, and therefore we are making some steady progress. But I think I also have to re-emphasize that a lot still needs to be done.
So what are the as we come to you? What are the so maybe on that point on this thing that I'm saying, for me, I actually think that the African continent is probably still at the normative stage of developing these frameworks and stuff. But whether or not we have moved to a stage where there's translation from volunteering to a dignified job is something that I still want to be educated and to be given examples.
Just you and Fred, to inform you, at African Union headquarters, it's something which has been taken into consideration. So I'm talking as a member of the steering group at African Union on volunteer linkage platform. So it's a steering group of 12 people who coordinate all volunteer work in Africa. So one of the main activity or the main program we are running now, it's how to look each member state of the African Union can have a national volunteer policy. So some of the countries, for instance, like Rwanda, where I come from, we have a national volunteer policy. In a Burkina Faso, in a Benin, some Africa, in Kenya, they have a national volunteer policy. So first of all, we are working on that legal framework. And even recently, we organized a workshop on that. So I would say if the member state have decided to
to
put
do the
a
normative
desk,
and policies,
a desk there is even a permanent staff at African Union, Dr. Meshesha, who is in charge of that steering group on volunteer promotion and volunteer linkage platform. So, which means they have seen it as something very important within it. Not only that, I don't know if you know, there is African Youth Volunteer Program, which is funded totally by African Union. So where it's like somehow exchange of volunteers between member state countries. So that shows like AU is taking it one of the pillars for young people to get job or just as we said before, just to give just a direction to young people.
But do we know that after these young people volunteer, do we know if they end up in jobs, or are there studies that we already can refer to from the African continent?
Yeah, there are various cases. Some of them have become even big people within their government. Some who have been. If I give you an example, like in my home country, nowadays our top leadership is appointing young people. So most of the time you will find people who have gone through those
from those programs,
programs of the continent or at worldwide level. So there are quite a lot of now. Maybe I cannot name people but I have so many examples of the people who got even jobs within AU itself from that program.
And do you have any examples, especially like studies that have been done? If not, for me, this is a gap that I would want my colleague Jacob
to look at.
To actually look at. I mean, because look, if this is happening and there's so much data, then it makes it even much easier to convince member states to actually make this and fund it at a high level. Because the challenge that we have been having in the past about volunteer work is that most people would not go into it because they then say it's not paid work. So that's number one. Number two is we are not guaranteed that we are going to get employed. So why volunteer? You see? So let's talk. You guys are the experts here, and let's help our audience, and myself included, to actually make sense of this.
You know, we say we learn together. Along the way, we get to find what it is, the solutions. But I still also want to agree with you that it would be necessary for a bit of a study to now really determine in terms of the transition of those who've been able to volunteer, but eventually
getting into jobs, dignified.
For us in the volunteering sector, we've looked at it from a different angle. We've always looked at the angle of impact of volunteering. We haven't looked at it as specific individuals that have really transitioned to be able to, but we have several of them, as my colleague has just mentioned, that we have. I always, with a lot of love for, is a guy that I've learned with. The guy in charge of Africa, lead business pursuit for VSO. Based in Kenya. His name is George Awala. He's a colleague. We've really worked so well with it. He started off as a volunteer with VSO. But look, he's now the Africa Business Pursuit lead for VSO. And then there are many other cases. But I think what would be critical for us is that if it is something that, for example, VATS could take and really do a study, that would be interesting because, as I mentioned, we've always looked and focused on what is the impact of volunteering. And for example, in Kenya, we tried to do that, a bit of measurement to get to know the contribution of volunteering. See what you're bringing in is quite interesting and something that me as a volunteer and as a volunteer manager would really be interested to really find how we can take it forward. But back at it, I think the fundamental is that volunteering is not necessarily something for the young people. Even though we focus on that, and of course this is interesting because we understand the youth demographic in Africa is huge. There's a bulge. And also what is critical for me again is not volunteering shouldn't be seen as something for the unemployed. Because again in the sector we want to encourage volunteers to come from every sector, including you, Prof. In your free time.
We'll talk about what I also think about that.
You can make time and do that. But bottom line, I think we need to find a way of bringing data together. If we can do that, that will be very
Yeah.
informative and can help us even in designing programs
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would be of benefit and making a very clear
Yeah.
transition in
Yeah.
which then volunteers end up getting gainful employment.
So the reason why I was bringing this angle is because, as part of this program that we are doing,
Yeah.
when you look at impact, we would look at impact at the level of an individual. Right? So we are saying impact at the level of individual. So if we send somebody to school, what are the changes that happen to that person at the individual level?
Okay.
So if somebody is volunteering, what is the impact at that individual level? And then there's impact at a secondary level, which is the community and family.
Yeah.
So if I send somebody to school, I will also want to know, so what will be the changes that will happen at a family and community level as a result of you getting access to education or getting a formal job. So there's a change in the individual level, there's a change at the community and family level, but you are also talking now at the change at the societal level. So you have been looking at the impact of volunteerism at the societal level, which is socioeconomic systems and so on. But this individual, so part of what we are studying as part of this research is actually those transitions from works like volunteering to dignified, transitions from water to becoming a business owner, right? So you go into the informal economy simply because you have nothing to do, but you get it from there. Then from there, your idea is to become maybe a business person. Then you transition to that. So that's why I was asking this question about volunteers.
I think
Very good.
there are at the continental level, I have talked about it, but at some country
levels,
if I give an example of Rwanda and Burkina Faso, there are another Western African countries I can't recall very well. So all those 3 stages you have been talking about, let me give an example of Rwanda where I live. So the youth demographic, as you said, like almost 70% of Rwandans are young people. So that's why we focus more on young people and what we do. Even our government has put much emphasis in promoting volunteering. So let's say, for example, all leaders from the grassroots level, being part of the councils from cell level, sector level, most of them are volunteers. So we have a lot of volunteer programs within the government itself. Within justice, within everywhere. We have what we call Rwanda Youth Volunteers in Rwanda. So maybe you can research on it. You see they are doing great jobs. So, and when you look at the changes at individual levels, so if I give you an example, we have some Rwandan youth volunteers who have been part of that program. So now some of them have been elected in those leadership positions, paid leadership position. So that shows the respect people give the work he has been doing as a volunteer. So coming just from a volunteer, for instance, you become like a mayor or a leader of your community. That shows there are some people who have gone to school who have much experience
and they have not managed to do that.
Competed together just to become, for instance, like a mayor of a district or something, and then you end up winning the elections because it's you who the community knows because you have been volunteering within the community. So there is a change. There is a change at your level as individual. Now you have got a dignified job. It has shows that the volunteer work you have been doing is well respected within the community, as well as the staff member of somewhere else. So at societal level, so that has helped, because if we had, for instance, I remember when we were advocating for national volunteer policy, it has been very easy because most of the people were decision makers. They have gone through volunteering. They knew the importance of having that policy. So when the policy was there, and then as I told you, our government, they don't just put policies there just to put policies maybe to get money. They put policies and then there is a committee to follow up through those joint action development forum. They follow how that policy is being implemented. If maybe there are some gaps in the policy, then they revise the policy. So that shows, like, I like to give example within my country. We have been having so many people from volunteer sector, and then they got very, like for instance, there is a young man, he has been volunteering for 7 years, but when he left the job, when he left volunteer, he got a job in USA. So because he has been volunteering with an organization, and VSO USAID was the funder. So as they were coming to monitor and evaluate the program, he was the one. They thought he was even a staff. So when they advertised a position, he went there, and then he had that experience he gained from what he has been doing on the field. So no one could really get that job than him, who has been just in
so
that
definitely
field.
I think we do have these examples, and they are really good, and I'm happy that we started at a continental level to have almost like a helicopter view of what's happening. And so what I'm hearing is that at the continental level, and in some instances, in some countries, we already have the normative frameworks in place. But we also are aware that there are transitions that are happening from voluntary work to dignified jobs, or to jobs generally. Now let's try and see if we can look at country levels, and now I want to talk maybe individually about your organizations. But at some point you were talking about volunteerism is not just for young people, right? And I want us to maybe look at the spectrum, or maybe different mechanisms that maybe you are using in Kenya or you're using in Rwanda. So for example, at one time when I was running the Southern Africa Trust, I figured out that a lot of the staff members that I was working with, if I asked them to give their money to an orphanage, they might struggle to take from their pockets. But if I said to staff members, we are now introducing a volunteering program, every month we are all going to go maybe work at that orphanage. We talk to the orphanage. If they say we want to construct a building, we want to paint, every month I would actually take my team, we'll identify an organization, and then we'll take the full day to go and do that. Then I'll come back and say, we went to do that, what did we do? We'll describe what we did and everything. Then I'll say, okay, that's fine. But now, from a financial point of view, how much do we earn every year? They would give me their cost net. Then I'll say, what is the amount? What is the percentage of the day that we spent today, and calculate it and monetize it. So I will know that from the ED, this day that you spent 8 hours, whatever, is equivalent to this money. So if I had to ask you to give that money, it would have been this money, but you didn't give it money. You gave time and your work and so on. But in the system, we'll compute that and say, as an institution, we volunteered this much, this is what happened on the field. But in monetary terms, this is what the institution actually measuring the monetary value of it. So there's that which is workplace based voluntary programs that institutions would do. But there's also payroll giving that is also done on a voluntary basis. It's not like your typical volunteerism, but it's that. And then the third one is staff members choosing organizations of their choice and saying, every month can I take maybe so many hours to do finance for this organization and etc. I just want to get the sense around the different expressions and mechanisms that you are using or are actually prevalent in Kenya and also in Rwanda. So maybe we start with you.
Oh, great. Prof, before I get to respond to that, I just wanted to get a little bit back and tell you that actually volunteering has made me become the person I am. And that started way back 99 to date, and it has sharpened my career path. And today, everything that I get that earns me a penny is because of the years that I've committed to volunteering.
So you're a classic example of this transition.
Volunteering has made me. So I'm a classical example of what it is that volunteering can do. And for every other opportunity that I've got, it is because of how much I committed to serve my community. But back at straight to what you're raising up, it is interesting to note that You brought in a very critical point, whereby when you tell people to donate directly, they will always be hesitant. But when you ask a team to commit their time and expertise, they'll be willing. And this is why we say that within the volunteering sector, we want to make it as lively and as interesting, so
fun.
that it's making it fun. With which then people don't realize that they're really doing so much. But I would also come in quickly to tell that the levels of volunteering. Yes, that community volunteering. There's a corporate volunteering or professional volunteering, like the example that you've given, where we now can quantify the man hours, if I may call them so. So some, people are these days sensitive. If you say man hours, they're like,
but women hours,
So within the sector, we have, for which I'm also part of, what we call pro bono, and actually we are all the same in it. So within this network of pro bono practitioners, which majorly tries to encourage corporate companies to allow their employees to spare some time to serve their communities and serve non-profit organizations.
I think not only corporate employees, just skilled people.
Skilled people, so to say, professionals from all diverse sectors to give their time. And then you can quantify that into a number of hours and then do the calculation and see. And exactly as you've given that example. And this is something that we are encouraging to happen because, again, we also must face the reality that sometimes within the sector, there have always been unscrupulous people. So when you tell guys to contribute money, someone will like, am I sure Fred is going to use my money right? So there are those challenges that there is. So the avenue to use your expertise and to allow time is an interesting one. What we do here in Kenya is we still get a multifaceted approach to volunteering. We still encourage a lot of youth volunteering who we recruit maybe from high school, from those who are fresh graduates, and of course even ongoing students who come into the various many groups and they are willing to do something in their communities. But then again, we have the professionals who want to just give their time and their expertise, and we encourage all these things. And I also want to re-emphasize that the Kenyan government, as an example here, we've developed what we call enabling environment or enabling infrastructures that support volunteers. That's where the policy document is coming, where our policy has lived its time and now we've started the processes of review. We are already looking at legal infrastructure on the same. And all this is in an effort to make sure that when we go out there into the community, what we are doing is tangible. And what we are doing is, you gave it a very good kind of starting from the individual and into the
family and community
and eventually to the society. And while we are doing this, again within the formation, which we also belong with my brother here, there's what we call the Global Volunteering Standards, which we are working together with an establishment known as Forum and VSO together and championing it. And we're trying to look at how do you, first of all, design a volunteer project to ensure that it will deliver the objectives of it. And then we look into the duty of care, which is basically about the rights and safeguarding the interest of the volunteer. And then we look at its implementation, and then eventually measuring the impact. And this way, we can confidently say that when we use a combined effort or a combined approach to volunteering, we can gradually start to see a lot of positive outcomes at individual level, at societal level, at family level, and eventually now we are also looking at how within the continent we can really bring this out. And this is where the Africa Union Volunteer Linkage Platform come in.
And in the case of Rwanda, Archimede?
Maybe I won't repeat what you have said because there are some of what we do.
Similarities.
But I will start by the concept. What the concept, first of all, are being used in the volunteer sector. So there are quite a lot of concepts There is that we call formal volunteering.
Yeah.
There's what we call corporate volunteering, pro bono. There are quite a lot of number of those concepts. So what we do in Rwanda, so there are that formal volunteering, where just volunteers, they come for a specific project where they can get a job description of what they are doing, and through those global volunteer standards, we have said, then we can measure. We follow all those processes, as we say, just how we design it, how are we going to implement it, the duty of care, how are we just safeguarding our volunteers and so on. So, and also we have that we call pro bono marathon. So we organize what we call pro bono marathon. It's just skilled people from corporate companies, from even government institutions, with the specific skills needed by a community-based organization or needed by a community somewhere. Maybe we can organize just to link those two. As maybe, if I give you an example, maybe you have had so young people who have been volunteering for so long. So, and then when you organize a forum with the private sector or some employers, come and meet our young people. You are recruiting, we know. We have seen you are recruiting people, meet our young people, discuss with them, and see if they have their interest. And something also we have seen, most of the young people here, when they write down their CVs, you will not find where they have put the volunteer work they have been doing. So that's why during the presentation of non-profit this afternoon, that's what I was afterwards I have been discussing with the colleague from DRC. So you cannot tell me you have reached 25 years without doing anything. You have started doing it, but you didn't record. So for instance, I was giving her an example. If you have become like a treasurer of Scout movement for 6 years, that's an experience you have got. You have led people, you have led I don't know if one of you has been a scout, so but you know there are so many responsibilities. And even within your community, there are quite a lot of number of young people that when it comes to write down their CVs, when they are asking,
they don't put
applying for a job, but they don't put it. And then second, also the employers. Sometimes when they see that volunteer work someone has been doing, because it was not remunerated, they don't consider that. Is that really experience?
But you see the thing here, Prof, is just to intervene a little bit before you proceeded. You know, there's a bit of stereotyping around volunteering. You know, so that even as a volunteer, you kind of feel ashamed to indicate that because maybe you are volunteering within a small organization. But I tell you for a fact, if you are volunteering for someone will be proud.
I was just going to tell you about Rwanda case. So in Rwanda, you may find someone appointed from a simple organization.
That is
very
great. That's
local
very good.
community-based organization. You find someone has been picked there and being appointed in a position.
So you've started acknowledging volunteering.
For us, they acknowledge.
But there are spaces where volunteering is still not recognized.
But they have started acknowledging it because of the policy first, the implementation of the policy. When the government find it, I can tell you, in all ministries, they have at least a component of volunteering within their program. When our government is developing development strategies, there is that component of volunteering. So, like our national strategies, there is that component of volunteering, and government spares a little money or enough money to run those volunteer programs. And also they rewards volunteers who are maybe not money, but
as government,
or as even as government. For instance, we have what community mediators. Those are like the local judges who mediate people who have civil
How do you call that? The guys like Shanja courts, or that was
no, we call them Abunzi in our local language. No, Abunzi. Yeah, it means me and Fred, you have a problem. So of lower than $3,000, you don't need to go to court. You go to those people. They
out of court settlement.
And then the government rewards them maybe by giving them a phone. Just to communicate, free phones, or we have community health workers, they have phones to communicate, they give them first aid toolkits so that they may assist people.
But you see, Archimede, what I think in your case, the reason why you have these successes and these results, I think it's also linked to I think it's also linked to some of your local initiatives.
Yeah.
Rwanda has got this nice thing around local initiatives. Some of them, for example, is it Umuganda?
Yeah,
Umuganda.
the community work.
The community work.
And the president leads it.
Yeah, and that one,
Yeah.
even whether you can actually look at it from and say this is people are giving their time.
Yeah,
and
we have
everything.
also
Right?
free zone. So
Yeah.
the people who coordinate and organize.
Yeah.
So they are volunteers.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
So
yeah.
it's a car-free zone where
Yeah.
everyone come out
Yeah.
to work
Yeah.
out and
Yes,
do sports and
yes,
do work.
yes.
But there are people who are organizing it. They are not paid. They are volunteers.
Yeah. So in your case, there's already that linkage to local initiatives,
Yeah.
and you have used and positioned local initiatives as the foundation for your country's transformation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, it makes sense to actually have volunteerism and voluntary workers given that prominence,
Yeah.
and even given
Yeah.
this ability to almost leapfrog
Yeah.
to the next frontier, whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
But in other countries, that may not be the case, because I think there's still, I think you use the word like, it's almost like in some places people look down on volunteers, so they're stereotyping. So, which brings me to the question: what do you think we need to do to get to the level of Rwanda and Burkina? I mean, I think you use Burkina Faso as another example.
So if I use
What do we need to do
because
to get to that level?
Burkina Faso has been the first country to have a national volunteer policy.
Yeah.
And I went to Burkina Faso. I found they have so many similarities, like we Rwandans.
Yeah.
So many things. Even that community work,
Yeah,
they used to
yeah,
have.
yeah,
They
yeah.
used to have it during Sankara time. So I have seen. I don't know who copied who,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it looks
yeah.
like they are extended cousins somehow.
yeah.
So what needs to be done in Africa? I know most of Africans, volunteering is something rooted in our culture,
Yeah,
starting even
yeah,
from our families.
yeah.
If someone has a wedding, you know how people
yeah.
contribute. So I think what needs to be done, it has to start from bottom up.
Yeah,
So not
yeah.
from up to down.
Yeah.
So the main challenge I have seen in other countries where I have gone, it's maybe a government official goes to a meeting and brings the idea. So, and when you go there and you are coming from top leadership and then you are bringing the idea, those people sometimes tend to see that you are imposing them.
Yeah.
What I would encourage, like civil society organizations, if they want not to be, I remember also we have gone through that struggle to be recognized, to be just volunteers, to be known. But as I said during the presentation, when you meet those top leadership with clear measures, evidence-based of what you have been doing, he cannot deny it.
Yeah.
So if you have done something, sometimes we are volunteers. What have you done?
Yeah.
How much have you contributed to our movement? But if you show them, for instance, like you said, these are the hours you have been working. How much are you? You challenge the one you are meeting. They start just you are waking them up. So they are saying, is that true?
Right.
And you remind them also that most of these leaders, you say they neglect it. They have been volunteers sometimes.
Themselves,
Sometimes you remind them, have you been a scout? Have you been a Girl Guides? Have you been what?
A Peace Corps.
Not the Peace Corps, just local.
The local initiatives.
So have you been a church choir leader or something like that?
So for us in philanthropy, for us in philanthropy, the closest that I can tell you in our communities, and we have now classified it as philanthropy. So, in our communities and villages, during let's say the farming or the harvesting season, we actually have situations where families that cannot afford, the community just decides that on this day, we are all going to farm in Fredrick's
Exactly.
farm.
Yeah.
And all that Fredrick might need to do is just to feed us. But we just go and farm and completely, do everything on one day. And then the next month maybe we go to somebody else, etc. And that is just people giving their time, but for the benefit of right
community.
So that's the closest
Yeah.
from a philanthropic point of view, because we've classified it as philanthropy. And so we don't even have to look at Peace Corps or whatever. We can actually use those examples.
Prof, he mentioned something that is very important.
Yeah.
That even though we talk about volunteering, some of us believe that volunteering origin is in Africa.
Yeah.
Because for you guys down the coast, it's Ubuntu.
Yeah.
For
Ubuntu,
us here,
yeah.
it is Harambe, which
Yes,
is
yes,
clarion
it's
call.
Muganda.
Yeah.
You are
Yeah,
Muganda.
Muganda, yeah.
And
In the Congo, it's Salongo.
Salongo. So,
Yeah.
what needs to be done for me, one, is re-emphasizing his point of it needs to have a bottom-up approach where it begins within a community.
Yeah.
Like what you are giving us an example, where, and we used to do that often in our communities as well.
Yeah.
So when it comes from the bottom, then it goes to the level of the devious tiers until it gets to the top.
Yeah.
But we can also allow it to be
To actually come from.
to come down. So what have we then made an effort to do? I'll give another example right here in Kenya. It is collaboration and then partnerships within the sector. So for instance, in Kenya, when for a long time we worked in our own silos as organizations, because for example, you realize the UNV has a program, a volunteer. VSO had a volunteer program, but still they were having employees and people. So in Kenya, we came together to form a network, which I coordinated the longest since 2014, and then the Volunteer Involving Organization Society of Kenya. So we came together, made a common voice, and went with that voice to government and shared with them that it is important what we are doing in the community. We are complementing the work that you're doing, but we think that the work we are doing needs some kind of a better structured platform. And that's where we talk about enabling environment for volunteering. Then we talk about policy and stuff like this. Within the policies then, we've also, for instance, in our case in Kenya, what we ensured is in the developing the framers of the policy, we made it that volunteering cascades down to the family unit. And from there it can go up. So we allowed the one that can bottom up and top down still to allow it to happen. But there is also the aspect that he just mentioned briefly about recognition and appreciation of good work that volunteers do within communities. So in Kenya, we've always conducted what we call the Volunteer of the Year Awards, just to celebrate those of us and talk about it, allow the media to talk about it, to ensure that it is known that when you do a little thing within your community, still people acknowledge you, people appreciate you, but we want also the government to acknowledge that. The third thing that I also think needs to be done is in terms of granting opportunities for such volunteers to learn and to further, for instance, like what you mentioned earlier, those short certificate courses so that they sharpen their skills. So I think then that becomes, an individual becomes a better volunteer when they have their skills enhanced. So capacity enhancement would be also good. But there is one thing that I still believe, and you mentioned it, and I think we also need to underscore that, is we need to do a kind of a measurement to determine what is the contribution at different levels of volunteering. One time we attempted to do that, to measure the impact of volunteering in terms of contribution to the GDP of Kenya. And that was 2017, 2018, 19. And that baseline survey indicated that volunteering in Kenya at that particular time was contributing up to 3.6% to the GDP. Such data, when it is validated and found to be credible, should then allow for even in terms of financing volunteer initiatives that then makes it grow. So those are some of the observations that I make.
If some other countries need volunteers not to be down looked at, so I would encourage the people who work with volunteers within non-profit sector or non-government organization, just try to map within your government, where government institution use volunteers. Try to map that. I know in African countries, there is no ministry which can implement their work without volunteers. Just map those programs where they use volunteers, try to bring together those volunteers. Sometimes they use them individually or separately, but once you map them, you start working with those volunteers whom they work with, and that's when they will also acknowledge you who are outside of their volunteer program. Just collaborate with them. Like I could say, use those platforms which are there, like celebrating of International Volunteer Day, Good Deed Day, Global Pro Bono Day. We have quite a lot of volunteer days we celebrate each year. So once you meet with those volunteers there, I remember when we started this in 2000, when we were just planning to have 2001, the International Year of Volunteers. So the mapping started by non-profit organizations, and then we came to realize, no, we are not celebrating volunteers. Let's bring on board those volunteers within government programs. So that's when they started, now let's take the lead. Now we are no longer the one leading the celebration of International Volunteer Day. Now it's the government.
You know, we've scratched the surface. I would want us to come to an end because I think it's a bit late now. But before we go...
May I ask you something?
Yes.
You know, even before we wind up, you know, I'm trying to get to understand volunteering and philanthropy. And it looks like two sides of the same coin.
It is. Actually, philanthropy is a broad term. Within philanthropy, you've got volunteers, you've got giving, all of that. So, in fact, we classify volunteerism as a form of philanthropy. Right? It is philanthropy. It is a form of philanthropy. So, in fact, philanthropy is defined as a voluntary action for public good.
Voluntary action for public good.
Yes. That's the definition of philanthropy. Voluntary action for public good. That's Payton and Moody who actually are well cited in definitions of philanthropy. But of course, we always say philanthropy is love for humanity. So again, we can even use that frame to define why somebody would decide I'm going to just volunteer. Which is why I wanted to get to this point that even though we're focused on young people volunteering, you actually say that it's actually for everybody. So in the global north, we actually find the older people who have retired actually then dedicating most of their time to do voluntary work. I wanted to check in your experience in your countries, what is the level of volunteering by elderly?
By retired?
No, the elderly.
Elderly.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what I was going to tell you. So when you look at the demography of most of African countries, like for example, if in Rwanda 70%
is young people,
35 and below. So those who are just in workforce, who are not young, between 35 and 55 or 65, how many are there? There are like 10 people, 10%. So most of Africans, by 65, when you are retiring, you are remaining with 1 year or 2 years, and then you are
then you're dead.
There's some group of very interesting volunteers I work with.
You're dying.
I would say we don't retire here, and this is why we don't retire. So the young people don't transition. So the older people complete your point first.
So I remember there is a time even we tried to do so in Rwanda back in 2011, 2010 within our organization, but we come to realize it's not possible because those who retired, you find like for instance, if you go in Rwanda, finding someone even when you are in a taxi or in a public place, I have asked people, finding someone of my age, 50 and above,
very few.
I may find I am in a bus, I am alone. I am the old person in the bus. So
everyone is saluting you. Like,
you have like 100 people, and you are like 2 or 3 people who are above 35. So you see what I mean? Who are above 50. So the retiree, you may find there is not even one.
Who is a volunteer?
And then, so finally, from a financing point of view, because of these stereotypes around volunteers and stuff, your organizations, what barriers do you face accessing financing for voluntary work? Because, like you said, at times there are these stereotypes and so on. And yet, honestly speaking, for us to promote volunteerism, we've got to get to a point where these young people volunteer, but their surroundings and their basic needs are taken care of. It's almost immoral, in my view, to be expecting somebody who has no access to basic needs, food, health, and everything, to actually be a volunteer, and there's nothing that is given back to them. And that has been one of the barriers in most of the cases where young people are expected to volunteer, but there's nothing that they really get except benefiting from skills training and hoping that someday you will get a proper job. But during the time that you are volunteering, if you look at most of the successful movements that are in the volunteering space, there's a huge backing of financing behind them to take people from the US, bring them here, from Europe, and while they are here, they are taken care of.
That's what I was. That's a good question and interesting one.
Yeah.
Because most of the people have been asking me, how are your program being financed? So when you ask that question, always people tend to understand money. Right? So, but for yes, of course, it's through trainings and what I have been having since 2000. So that's I come to realize when you need your volunteer program to be financed. First of all, think of in-kind support,
contributions,
in-kind support. You have got your volunteer. When you have a very well-designed program of what you're doing, and then map what you will be needing. Maybe I will need airtime. There I will have to contact MTN or Airtel or can you give us free airtime?
Right.
So maybe we will need refreshment.
You go to beverage companies like Coca-Cola.
Beverage companies, Coca-Cola or others, and then they give you the. Young people, they are not so complicated. Once they have got that airtime, they have got that refreshment. They have got, so maybe you need to hire sound system music. Just contact a DJ who is a friend of yours. Please, can you contribute just one day for this? So, and you will find when you ask people to contribute in kind, they are okay with it.
It's easy to do that.
It's easy to do that. So it's on behalf of us who are organizing volunteers, make a proper, very good concept note. And even those maybe who will follow this one, I will tell them. So what they need to do, there are quite a lot of number of resources they can get online. Maybe if they go on Good Deed Day website, there are quite a lot of resources which can help them to organize an event. If they go on another website or on a Pro Bono website, there are quite a lot of resources to show them. So once you have organized 3 or 4 events, so those corporate companies, they have funding within their CSR programs, their corporate social responsibilities. Next time when they are organizing something, they say, let's call that person so to help us organize that thing. Because they don't want their staff to be busy on that. So they call you, they say, okay, organize this and this and this and this and this. And then they say, what do you need? So they give you what you need, and if you need even money,
then they can also
give it to you so easily. So that's how we started. We started by even doing some public collection within businesses, individuals, whatever they give to you. And some of them they give motivation from like T-shirt or such kind of thing. Young people, they like such kind of small thing, and then they have it fun. So later on, are those people we contacted demanding in-kind contribution who gave us money.
But I also think, Prof, in conclusion,
let's conclude.
I think bottom line is volunteering is not well funded, and if so, underfunded. Because I think what it is, and that's why I mentioned that we are trying to work on frameworks that would allow for proper project designs, so that volunteer initiatives also just attract substantive support as any other project, because without which then there wouldn't be no funding. Because the example that my brother is giving is one of living in hope that things will get better. But I think we need seriously well thought out designed projects, volunteer projects, and this is why we are looking at creating some global templates where then we can learn. And also I think also we need to borrow from best practice, even from the other established organizations, just to know how they are doing it, because A majority of volunteer initiatives in Africa are also founded by young people who barely have connections and they have no one to talk to, you know.
Fred, can I cut you short?
Okay,
so,
go ahead.
The other thing, maybe I have forgotten to tell you, once you have that policy and your government is streamlining it into its strategy and its program, it's easy for you to get funding from international development of the government because they are seeing what you are doing. It's within in line with the government programs and the strategies. So that has helped us also in Rwanda getting money from funders. For us, we are getting funding from international development partners because first of all, they ask you which SDGs are you
aligning your
program. So when you come from the global level, because most of they are looking at the global level, what are strategies of your national, your government national strategy, and you align it with? And then when you show them, they say, okay, it's okay. If you find them, that's section.
Brothers, gentlemen, we have just scratched the surface. In fact, I'm realizing that we as CAPSI now, we have some work to do. And luckily, Jacob, who introduced us, is actually at CAPSI, is the deputy director. We are going to take this as one of our key focus areas, working with you to do the research, to do the convenings, but also to try and see what else needs to be done in order to make this a good pathway towards dignified, but also changing the livelihoods and lives of young people in the continent. So thank you so much. I know we have really not covered everything, but this was fascinating for me to hear. And for me this was really fascinating. But thank you so much, Archimede, and thank you so much, Fredrick, for joining us. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.